I always thought the worst betrayals came like car crashes, sudden loud leaving wreckage in their wake. But the truth is, some betrayals don't crash. They toast you with a smile cut crystal glass in hand, while the knife is already halfway through your back. It was my 40th birthday, and the Prescott family spared no expense. Oceanfront Club, live quartet, soft lighting, custom menu printed in cursive gold. It had all the makings of a night you'd remember for years, for the right reasons. Sienna stood next to me in a green silk dress that caught every flicker of candlelight. My brother Gavin held court near the bar, already 3 bourbons deep and charming the room as always. My parents, Dean and Margot, hovered like stage managers, ensuring every detail whispered old money without ever having to say it out loud. You'd think, looking from the outside, we were the picture of unity. But if you looked closer, really looked, you'd have noticed how no one quite met my eyes that night. The plan was to give a small speech, thank the family, talk about building legacy, but as dessert was brought out some ridiculous multi-tiered chocolate tower that looked more sculpture than food, my father raised his glass before I had the chance to speak. To Daniel, he began, the glue of this family, the one who always shows up, who never causes waves. Everyone clinked their glasses. There was a murmur of hear, hear, and that strange forced laughter people do when something's off. But no one wants to acknowledge it. Then Sienna touched my hand, gently, like she used to. Only now it felt like a prop part of some script I hadn't been shown. You've always been good to me, Daniel, she said softly, her voice suddenly serious. Too good, maybe. And that's why we want to talk to you, openly, as a family. Something in my chest tightened. Gavin stood up next to her. His voice slid into the room like oil on marble. Things change, little brother. Relationships evolve. We're not in college anymore. We're grown. And being grown means we stop pretending. He didn't have to say it. I saw it in the way he looked at her. I'd seen it for months, the inside jokes, the convenient meetings, the way she laughed around him like I wasn't even there. Still, I waited. Maybe part of me needed to hear it out loud. Sienna didn't blink. Gavin and I, we're together. Emotionally, physically. We didn't plan it. It just happened. She said it like they'd spilled a glass of wine at brunch. Something regrettable, but hardly worth making a scene over. And you all knew. My voice barely rose above a whisper, but somehow the entire room seemed to hear it. Eyes averted. Forks stilled. My mother cleared her throat, patting my shoulder awkwardly. It's a complicated situation, sweetheart. But we didn't want to hurt you. We wanted you to be part of the new vision. The new vision. Like this was some company rebrand, and I was just an outdated logo they were too polite to retire. Gavin grinned, like this was his product launch. We're not kicking you out, Danny. We just, hope you can be mature. Accept what makes her happy. What makes us happy. I stared at him, at her, then at my father, who had always preached tradition like gospel. He just sipped his scotch and looked away. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the presentation. The assumption that I'd sit there, say, thank you, and nod. That I'd toast to their affair because I was too decent to make a scene. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, lifted my glass, and took a slow sip, letting the burn of the whiskey ground me. I remembered something Gavin once said years ago, drunk and boastful, at a college party. Danny's like a coat rack. Always there. Holds everything up. But you don't think about it until it falls. Well, maybe it was time to fall, but not in the way they expected. Because they mistook my silence for surrender. My steadiness for stupidity. What they didn't know was that 6 months ago, when I found a receipt from a hotel I'd never stayed in, tucked inside Sienna's coat, I stopped being blind. I started preparing. And tonight, while they toasted their new vision, they had no idea the real toast was already happening in the minds of every guest who suddenly saw exactly who they were. And me, I wasn't the coat rack anymore. I was the earthquake they didn't see coming. I didn't walk out of that dinner. I stayed until the last glass was emptied, until the last guest offered their stiff hug and vague stay strong, and slipped into the night. I even smiled as the servers cleared the plates, thanked the pianist for the music, kissed my mother on the cheek, and said, "Thank you for a beautiful night." Because when you're being erased in slow motion, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to disappear on cue. That night, Sienna came home late. Gavin had offered to drop her off like it was still some shared joke, like I was already reduced to a footnote. She walked through the door heels in hand, avoiding my eyes like a teenager past curfew. "I didn't expect you to stay," she muttered, more confused than apologetic. I didn't answer. I just handed her a folded blanket and the spare key to the guest room. That was the last full sentence we exchanged for weeks. During the day, I kept showing up at Prescott and Prescott, the family firm I'd poured 17 years into. I still reviewed drafts, signed contracts, nodded through meetings while Gavin played golden boy in the spotlight. But behind the scenes, I began pulling back. I handed off my biggest clients to a junior partner quietly, respectfully. I changed the passwords to my private cloud drive. I logged off group chats mid-conversation. No one questioned it. No one noticed, because I was never the one they paid attention to until something broke. And by then, it's always too late. Every night I'd go back to my apartment and open a plain black notebook. In it, I sketched something I hadn't done since college. Not just buildings, but concepts. Homes that healed, workspaces that breathed, structures that protected people who no longer felt seen. Maybe it was silly. Maybe it was just survival. But it made me feel something I hadn't felt in years alive. Around week 3, I made a call I'd been sitting on. Elena Torres. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. She used to be my best friend, before Sienna told me it looked a little inappropriate to keep a single woman so close. So I let the friendship fade. Like so many other pieces of myself, I'd given up quietly to keep the peace. Turns out, Eleanor had gone on to start a private investigation firm. High-end, discreet, not cheap. When she picked up and I said my name, there was a long pause, then a short laugh. "I always wondered when you'd finally call." She didn't ask many questions. I didn't offer many answers. Just a Dropbox folder. Some names, a timeline, a list of places Sienna said she was when she wasn't. I wasn't even angry anymore. I just wanted clarity, something clean. Something I could hold in my hands that proved what my gut had been screaming for years. While Elena worked, I kept building in the shadows. No one at the firm knew I'd kept the LLC for a small side venture I'd started 5 years ago, Terraform Studios. A name I'd once dreamed of using to break away from the family's cold colonial glass towers. The project had been shelved after Gavin and my father mocked it for being too niche, too green, too emotional. But I had clients, quiet ones. A women's shelter in Pasadena, a trauma recovery clinic in Oregon. People who didn't need glossy towers, they needed sanctuary. I started taking on projects again. Nights, weekends, early mornings, drafting, submitting permits, securing grants under the radar. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about remembering who I used to be before compromise became my job description. One night around 2 a.m., Eleanor sent me a text. "You were right, but you were also underestimated. Sending files." What she sent wasn't just evidence, it was strategy fuel. Photos, credit card logs, audio snippets of Gavin bragging to a colleague about how Danny's the kind of guy who thanks you for stealing his lunch. Sienna confiding to a friend over brunch that Daniel doesn't get it. He's still playing by rules no one respects anymore. And the cherry on top, a draft email from Gavin to our father, recommending that the family firm phase me out with kindness, of course, and shift my equity toward long-term advisors who align better with the firm's forward direction. They didn't just betray me. They were preparing to erase me. But here's the thing about men like Gavin and my father. They're so used to owning the spotlight, they never think to check what's happening in the dark. And in the dark, I wasn't just surviving. I was sharpening. The invitation read, Prescott and Prescott, 50 years of legacy. A private gala, honoring the family that built a city. Black tie, Coastal Museum Hall, attendance mandatory. It was Gavin's idea, of course. He loved anniversaries, mostly because they gave him a stage. He'd even flown in an old college professor to deliver a keynote about visionary leadership in modern architecture. I wasn't supposed to be the visionary in the room. I was supposed to be the symbol. The dependable brother in the background, smiling politely, while Gavin soaked in the applause. I let them think that. When I walked in that night, I wasn't just wearing a tailored suit. I was wearing proof. Folded inside my inner jacket pocket was a thumb drive. On it, photos, voice recordings, financial files, and one document Gavin had never expected anyone else to see, a backdated memo recommending the transfer of my shares to external stakeholders. My removal had been premeditated. All I had done was prepare for my turn. The museum had been converted into a corporate theatre. Giant posters of our building projects lined the walls. Guests sipped champagne under spotlights and Art Deco arches. Gavin stood near the stage, dazzling as always, holding court like a king receiving tribute. Sienna was there too, in silver this time. She kissed cheeks, laughed at jokes, gripped Gavin's arm like she belonged there. I watched for a while. No one noticed. That's the thing about being overlooked for so long, it becomes your superpower. You move unseen, unheard, until you don't. At exactly 8:17 p.m., I stepped up to the mic. There hadn't been an announcement, no cue. The pianist trailed off mid-chord as I adjusted the stand. Heads turned slowly first, confused, then expectant. Gavin raised an eyebrow from the crowd. My father frowned. I smiled gently. I wasn't on the program tonight, I know. But since we're honoring 50 years of legacy, I thought I'd take a moment to talk about foundation. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sienna's glass froze mid-air. We talk about the buildings we've raised. I continued, my voice calm even. But what about the people we bury beneath them? I tapped the projector remote. The room darkened. The first slide appeared a photo of Sienna and Gavin entering the Coral Bay Resort hand in hand. Date stamped. Clear. Gasps. Sharp breaths. Slide 2. A text exchange between Sienna and her friend, mocking my emotional fragility and wondering when I'd finally get the hint. Slide 3. The draft email Gavin sent to my father, suggesting I be slowly removed from decision-making and equity talks due to being unfocused, overly sentimental. My mother clutched her necklace. Gavin stepped forward. Daniel, that's enough. This isn't... I held up a hand. You'll get your turn, brother. Just like I waited through yours. Slide 4, an audio clip. Sienna's voice. He still thinks loyalty means something, like that'll protect him. Gavin's laugh followed Danny. He's like an old wall, sturdy, boring, and always in the way. I let it play. Let it sting? The silence in the room was suffocating. No one moved. No one made eye contact. I stepped away from the mic and walked to the center of the stage. Some of you knew. Some of you suspected. And some of you stayed quiet because it was easier than confronting the truth. But I stayed quiet too, not because I was weak, but because I was building. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a thin folder. Inside this, I said, is the official dissolution of my partnership with Prescott and Prescott. Effective immediately. I've sold my shares in Terraform Studios, the side venture you all ignored just last week, to our largest investor, for a valuation you never thought I'd reach without you. I paused. Gavin, I bought you out? And you didn't even notice. He blinked. What are you talking about? That startup you mocked 2 years ago, the Trauma Center Design in Oregon. They just went national. So when your name showed up on a non-compete breach clause from that little side deal you ignored, well, let's just say the lawyers had a field day. I handed the folder to our father. Everything is legal. Signed, filed, permanent. Sienna's voice cracked behind me. You planned this. All of it. I turned slowly. The moment you both toasted your future in front of me like I was a piece of old furniture. Gavin looked pale now, like the lighting had shifted. This is petty, he hissed. This is vindictive. No, I said. This is clarity. I looked around the room. To everyone else, this isn't just my story. It's a warning. Be careful who you erase while building your empire, because some of us remember everything. Then I walked off stage. No mic drop, no applause. Just the sound of heels on marble whispers behind me, and 2 people once so sure of their power now stranded in their own undoing. And me, I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. The next morning, the family group chat was silent. Not even my mother, who usually sent a sunrise devotional and a blurry photo of her garden, said a word. I wasn't surprised. Some silences aren't absence, they're shame marinating in real time. By noon, the news had made the rounds. One of the gala guests had leaked a clip of the projector moment, blurry but clear enough. Gavin's smirk. Sienna's stunned expression. My line, be careful who you erase. It was already circling the LinkedIn crowd like wildfire, packaged as a masterclass in silent leadership by Monday morning. I didn't post anything. I didn't need to. The story carried itself. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. I received 2 types of emails that week. The first cold, calculated apologies. From firm partners, clients, extended family. People who had sat at that gala, eaten that catered halibut, clapped for Gavin's opening speech, and then watched the whole narrative flip in under 7 minutes. They wanted me to know they had no idea that they never supported the decisions being made behind your back. One even said, "It's inspiring how gracefully you handled it all." Gracefully. Like I was some ballet dancer instead of a man gutted and rebuilt from scratch. The second type of email was quieter. Real. A junior architect I once mentored wrote, "You taught me that being the quiet one isn't weakness. Watching you take back your voice, I've never been more proud." That one I read twice. Saved it. Gavin didn't call, but his assistant did. She left a voicemail laced with panic. "There's been investor fallout. The board wants a meeting. Mr. Prescott would like to speak privately before things escalate further." I didn't call back. They always come back when the machine starts to smoke. I heard from a source at the firm that 2 major city contracts had been pulled pending leadership restructuring. The phrase used was ethical oversight, which in corporate speak is a polite way of saying your reputation now costs more than your contribution. Sienna, meanwhile, tried a different approach. She went public, but softly. A vague Instagram story, white text over a blurred sunset. Healing isn't linear. Mistakes aren't monsters, followed by hashtags like Steech growth and Gigs evolving. I didn't respond, but the comments did. Someone reposted the projector clip in her replies. Another wrote, "Healing isn't cheating with your husband's brother, babe." By the end of the day, she'd deleted it. My father showed up at my apartment 3 days later. No warning. Just knocked like we were still close, like he hadn't sat through my slow erasure with a glass of scotch and a passive shrug. He stood there, still in his suit, holding a bottle of bourbon we once drank together after late design reviews. "I just want to talk," he said. I let him in, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I needed to see if he'd finally say the thing I waited to hear. We sat in silence for a moment. He looked around the room, noticing the absence of family photos. The walls weren't empty, but they were mine now. My art, my taste, my space. "I didn't know how bad it had gotten," he said finally. "I thought you were okay with the way things were. You never complained." That line. You never complained. As if silence equals consent. As if being steady meant I deserved to be ignored. "I didn't complain," I said, "because I was still hoping you'd see me. That maybe one day showing up would be enough." He looked down. "I'm sorry, Daniel," he said. Not just for what happened, but for letting it happen right in front of me. It didn't fix anything, but it mattered. Not because it healed me, but because it proved I wasn't imagining things all along. He left soon after. No big gestures, just a long pause at the door, and then he was gone. The next week, I signed the final documents to officially dissolve all remaining ties to Prescott and Prescott. It felt like pulling out an IV I hadn't realized was still attached. For the first time in my adult life, my future wasn't tethered to my last name. I rebranded Terraform Studios, brought on 2 new partners, young, brilliant, overlooked, just like I had been. We didn't have mahogany desks or crystal trophies, but we had blueprints that felt like purpose, designs that spoke to real lives, not legacies. I didn't build towers anymore. I built homes for people rebuilding themselves, and somehow that felt like enough. Healing is strange. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or a finishing bell. It doesn't post a status update. Sometimes it just shows up quietly, like sunlight slipping through closed blinds, soft, unexpected, but unmistakably real. That's what the weeks felt like after I walked away. Quiet mornings, unfamiliar calm, no late-night phone calls, no performative family dinners, just me, my work, and a stillness I hadn't felt in years. People kept asking if I'd ever forgive them. I didn't have an easy answer. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about cutting the hook out of your own skin so you can stop bleeding for people who keep pretending they never hurt you. I didn't want revenge anymore. I didn't want Gavin to suffer, or Sienna to spiral, or my parents to grovel. That's the thing about real peace. It doesn't need a witness. It just needs space to breathe. One afternoon, I got coffee with Elena. We hadn't spoken much since the reveal. She'd done her job with razor precision, and then, like always, stepped back and let me own the outcome. We sat outside, warm breeze, paper cups in hand. "You look lighter," she said. I smiled. "It feels weird. Healing usually does," she replied. Then she paused. "You know I was worried you'd go nuclear, that you'd burn the whole thing down." "I wanted to," I admitted. But then I realized I didn't need to destroy anything. I just needed to stop protecting it. She nodded, and we sat in silence for a while. Not awkward, just easy. Before we parted, she handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "It's from the day I left," she said. "Back when Sienna asked you to choose. Inside was a Polaroid. The 3 of us, a picnic by the lake. I was laughing, head thrown back, young, unburdened. Just so you remember, Elena said you were never boring. They just didn't see you." A few days later, I visited one of our new project sites, an aftercare facility for veterans with PTSD. We'd just poured the foundation. The team was walking the perimeter, checking leveling. One of the young architects, a kid who reminded me of myself 10 years ago, asked why we designed the entrance facing west. Because it catches the sunset, I said. Every day ends, no matter how dark it got. He smiled. You really think of everything. Not everything I wanted to say, just the things that matter now. I never responded to Sienna's final letter. She sent it handwritten, like that would make it more sincere. She talked about regret, confusion, therapy, love. Asked if I could ever imagine a future where we at least talk. I couldn't. Not because I hated her, but because I had already spoken with my silence, with my exit, with the life I chose to build instead of collapse. People think closure is a conversation. Sometimes it's just a closed door you never open again. If there's one message I carry from all this, it's this. You don't have to shout to reclaim your worth. You don't have to explode to escape a prison. Sometimes the loudest kind of power is peace. It didn't happen overnight. But little by little, my life stopped being about who hurt me and started becoming about who I could become without them. The first thing I did was move. Nothing dramatic, just a small craftsman house in the hills above San Rafael. Modest, sunlit wood beams, quiet porch. I could hear the wind at night, not traffic. I could hear myself think. I got rid of the old dining set Sienna had picked out, heavy, dark, all angles and appearances. Replaced it with a long pine table I sanded and finished myself. Imperfect. Real. Every dent a memory I didn't mind keeping. I cooked again, not out of necessity, but joy. Sunday mornings smelled like rosemary potatoes and vinyl records. I'd forgotten how good music sounded when no one was talking over it. At Terraform, we weren't just building structures, we were rebuilding people's sense of home. And somewhere along the way, I realized that included me. One of our projects was a transitional housing complex for women leaving abusive relationships. I sat in on the design review one afternoon. A young woman, not more than 26, looked at the blueprint and asked, "Can the kitchen face the courtyard I want to cook and still see my daughter play?" It stopped me cold. Because it was so simple, so profound. She wasn't asking for granite countertops or statement lighting. She wanted presence, connection, visibility. I made that change myself. That night. About 2 months after the gala, Elena stopped by. She was in the area, she said, brought homemade chili and a 6-pack. We sat on the porch, wrapped in fleece throws, watching the fog roll in. She didn't bring up Gavin, or Sienna, or any of it. Instead, she asked, "Do you feel free?" Yet I thought about it. And then I nodded. "I don't feel haunted anymore," I said. "I don't feel like I'm waiting for something to go wrong." She smiled, slow and knowing. "That's not freedom, Daniel. That's peace. They're not the same, but they're close cousins." She stayed until after midnight. We didn't label anything. We didn't need to. Sometimes two people don't need to define what's between them, they just need to protect it. Whatever it is, it feels good. Quiet. Real. No performance. No applause. Just warmth that doesn't ask for proof. And perhaps the best part of starting over is learning that you don't need to start from scratch. You just start from truth. No more pretending to be the easy one, the safe one, the steady one, so others could get away with being careless. Now I'm just Daniel. No titles, no footnotes. And for the first time, I don't feel like I'm rebuilding what was lost. I'm building something new. It happened on a Tuesday. ordinary, overcast. I was on my way back from a site visit, mud still drying on my boots, when I stopped by the lobby of our new office to drop off samples. The place smelled like cedar and fresh paint. Light spilled in through tall windows. Everything felt earned, and then I saw them. Sienna and Gavin, standing near the reception desk, awkward and out of place, like tourists in a city they used to rule. Gavin wore a wrinkled suit and the same tired grin he used when pitching half-baked ideas. Sienna looked smaller than I remembered, hair-tied back eyes, scanning for a reaction that didn't come. They didn't see me at first. I could have turned around. I could have ducked behind the elevator column. But I didn't. I walked straight toward them. Their heads snapped up. Daniel Sienna stepped forward, voice soft, hesitant. We didn't want to ambush you. We just thought... I held up a hand. Not harsh, not angry. Just enough to make her stop. No speeches, I said, calm as breath. Not here. Not ever again. Gavin tried to recover, clearing his throat. Look, man. I know things got messy. I didn't think you'd take it that far. I gave him a half smile. I didn't take it anywhere, Gavin. I just stopped protecting you. You did the rest on your own. Sienna's eyes shimmered. Can't we at least talk? Just once. For closure. That word. I looked at them, really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see power or control or betrayal. I saw two people still circling the wreckage of their own making, hoping I'd help them clean it up. I already have closure, I said quietly. It came the day I realized I didn't need revenge, just distance. They didn't argue. They just stood there, unsure, exposed, fading, and I turned and walked away. Not to prove a point, not to make a statement, but because some doors don't slam, they just stay closed. And behind that door was a version of me I'd finally outgrown. Some betrayals don't scream, they whisper, and they last. The toast that broke the silence isn't just a story of revenge or exposure. It's about what happens when someone who's been quiet for too long finally decides to stop shrinking to make others comfortable. It's about reclaiming your voice, not by yelling, but by walking away without needing anyone's permission. The lesson here is universal. When people try to convince you that being overlooked is the price of keeping peace, they're not offering peace. They're asking for your silence. And silence, when it comes, at the cost of your self-worth, is never noble. Sometimes justice doesn't look like punishment. It looks like distance boundaries and rebuilding without bitterness. You don't have to destroy someone to free yourself. You just have to stop holding the door open for those who burned down your home. If this story made you feel something, or made you think of someone, leave a comment below. Have you ever experienced a quiet betrayal or found strength in letting go? We'd love to hear how you found your way back to yourself. Don't forget to hit like if this resonated with you and subscribe so you won't miss more stories like this, real, raw, and rooted in the kind of truth we often whisper, but rarely say out loud. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Sometimes peace begins with simply choosing you.